22,000 feet beneath the Philippine Sea, deeper than Mount Everest is tall, lies a warship that refused to retreat. Hull number DE-413, a destroyer escort barely longer than a city block, now rests at a depth that would implode a modern nuclear submarine. Her guns are still trained forward, frozen in the position they held when she charged directly at the most powerful battleship fleet ever assembled. An enemy she had no business engaging. But here's the paradox that haunts naval historians. How does a 1,350-ton escort vessel, built to hunt submarines, not fight surface battles, end up scoring hits on a 13,000-ton heavy cruiser at point-blank range? Why would her captain order a suicidal torpedo run against ships that outgunned him 40-1? And what do the forensics of her wreck reveal about those final 20 minutes when she stood between the Japanese Imperial Navy and the American landing forces at Leyte Gulf? The answers are written in steel 4 miles down, in a battle scar pattern that tells one of the most defiant last stands in naval warfare. June 2022, the research vessel Petrel was conducting deep-sea surveys in the Philippine Sea when sonar returns painted something extraordinary on the monitors. At 22,621 feet below the surface, deeper than any warship wreck ever discovered at that time, lay the unmistakable profile of a destroyer escort. The pressure at this depth exceeds 10,000 pounds per square inch. The initial imagery stopped the expedition team cold. The forward 5-inch gun mount wasn't just intact, it was still trained to starboard, locked in a firing position. Shell damage peppered the hull in a pattern suggesting sustained close-range combat, not a single catastrophic hit. This wasn't a ship that had been ambushed. This was a ship that had fought against something much bigger. For the families of the 89 men lost with USS Samuel B on October 25, 1944, this discovery was confirmation of a 78-year-old battle account that some had dismissed as embellished. A story of a tiny escort that charged the center of the Japanese battleship fleet and lived long enough to make them bleed. Before we dive into her origins, a quick word. Subscribing is the simplest way to support this work. It helps us dedicate more resources to documenting these war graves before time and the ocean erase them forever. Now let's meet the ship that refused to run. USS Samuel B. launched from Brown Shipbuilding in Houston, Texas on January 20th, 1944. She was named for Coxswain Samuel Booker Roberts, Jr., a Navy Cross recipient who gave his life at Guadalcanal. As a John C. Butler-class destroyer escort, Roberts measured 306 feet in length, displaced 1,350 tons, and carried a crew of 224. Her 2 turbo-electric drive systems produced 12,000 shaft horsepower for a top speed of 24 knots, fast enough to screen carriers, but woefully slow compared to the 33-knot Japanese cruisers she would soon face. Her armament reflected her intended role as a submarine hunter: 2 5-inch guns, 4 twin 40mm mounts, 10 20mm cannons, 3 torpedo tubes, and depth charges. Nobody designed her to fight battleships. She commissioned on April 28, 1944, and departed for the Pacific on June 10th. 4 months later, she would be at the bottom of the Philippine Sea, having rewritten what a destroyer escort could accomplish. October 25, 1944, 0645 hours. Off Samar Island, Rear Admiral Clifton Sprague's task unit, Taffy 3, was providing air support for the Leyte Gulf landings when lookouts reported pagoda masts on the horizon. Within minutes, the identification became horrifying. Admiral Takeo Kurita's entire center force, 4 battleships including Yamato, 6 heavy cruisers, 2 light cruisers, and 11 destroyers. 23 warships whose combined firepower exceeded Taffy 3 by a factor of 10. Sprague's force consisted of 6 escort carriers, 3 destroyers, and 4 destroyer escorts, including Samuel B. Roberts. The math was brutal. Kurita's force could make 28 knots to the carrier's 18 and would reach gun range in less than 2 hours. Then they would annihilate Taffy 3 and slaughter the undefended invasion transports at Leyte. Unless something suicidal happened. Commander Robert W. Copeland received Sprague's desperate order at 0716. Small boys attack. The three destroyers immediately turned toward the enemy. Copeland looked at his destroyer escorts and made a decision that defied every tactical doctrine. "We're making a torpedo run," he announced. "The outcome is doubtful, but we will do our duty." Roberts surged forward at 24 knots directly toward Kurita's heavy cruisers. She was immediately bracketed by 14-inch shells from the battleship Congo, each weighing 1,400 pounds. Geysers erupted around her as Japanese cruisers opened fire. Copeland ordered evasive maneuvers, and impossibly, Roberts closed to 4,000 yards before launching her 3 torpedoes. Then she did something no destroyer escort was designed to do. She stayed and fought. For the next hour and a half, Roberts traded salvos with ships that outweighed her 10-1. Her forward 5-inch mount, manned by gunner's mate Paul Henry Carr, fired 608 rounds. So many the paint blistered off the barrel, and the gun crew worked in 140-degree heat. At one point, Roberts closed to 5,300 yards of the heavy cruiser Chokai, and raked her superstructure with armor-piercing shells. Chokai would later withdraw with severe damage, but the arithmetic was unforgiving. By 0850, Roberts had taken multiple direct hits. An 8-inch shell penetrated her engine room, killing everyone inside. Another punched through her aft gun mount. A third opened her hull below the waterline. At 0905, with his ship listing heavily and fires raging, Copeland gave the order to abandon ship. At 0910, USS Samuel B. Roberts capsized and sank, taking 89 of her crew with her. But she had accomplished something extraordinary. The ferocious attacks by Roberts and the other small boys bought Taffy nearly 3 hours and forced Kurita's formation to break. At 0925, still believing he was fighting a much larger force, Kurita ordered his fleet to withdraw. The invasion beaches at Leyte were saved. The fatal blow came at 0851 when an 8-inch shell from the cruiser Chikuma struck her port side, penetrating the hull and detonating inside the forward engine room. The explosion killed every man in the engineering spaces and severed the main steam lines. Roberts went from 24 knots to dead in the water in 30 seconds. Now stationary, she became an easy target. A second shell struck aft, igniting ammunition stores. A third hit below the waterline, opening an 8-foot gash. The most devastating hit came at 0900 when a shell struck the aft 5-inch gun mount directly. Gunner's mate Paul Henry Carr, who had been firing continuously despite severe burns, was mortally wounded. With his body shattered, Carr loaded one final round and shouted for someone to fire the gun. He died still cradling the 54-pound shell. Copeland gave the abandoned ship order at 0905 when the list. At 9:10 a.m., Roberts rolled onto her port side and slid beneath the surface stern first. Of 224 men aboard, 120 made it into the water alive. Over the next 50 hours, exposure and shark attackers claimed another 31 before rescue arrived on October 27th. RV Petrel, owned by Microsoft co-founder Paul Allen's estate, had been systematically surveying Pacific battlefields since 2017. The primary search tool was a HUGIN autonomous underwater vehicle equipped with synthetic aperture sonar, conducting surveys of a 50-square-mile search box where calculations suggested Roberts had gone down. When the AUV detected a target at 22,621 feet, Petrel deployed a deep-rated ROV equipped with 4K cameras. The ROV had to descend for over 4 hours to reach the wreck. At this depth, water pressure exceeds 10,000 pounds per square inch. The mapping process required 3 separate dives over 5 days, capturing thousands of images and hours of video. The extreme depth presented unique preservation conditions: near freezing temperatures, minimal current, and virtually no oxygen meant the main hull structure remained remarkably intact. Most critically, battle damage, the shell holes and blast patterns, remained clearly visible after 78 years. Positive identification relied on multiple factors. The forward 5-inch gun mount remained trained 15 degrees to starboard, consistent with survivor accounts that it had jammed in that position. The mount showed severe heat discoloration, corroborating testimony about the extreme rate of fire. The gun mount exhibited catastrophic blast damage from an internal explosion, matching reports of the ammunition cook-off that killed Gunner's mate car. A shell hole approximately 8 inches in diameter penetrated the port hull precisely where survivors placed the fatal engine room hit. Roberts had received additional gun mounts during refit, a non-standard modification visible on the wreck. The stern depth charge rack showed an unusual securing arrangement, a field modification Commander Copeland had ordered that appeared in no official documentation but was mentioned in survivor interviews. On June 22, 2022, the Naval History and Heritage Command issued formal confirmation. The wreck at 22,621 feet was definitively USS Samuel B. Roberts, DE-413. The discovery matters beyond resolving a mystery. At this extreme depth, Roberts represents a time capsule of 1944 naval engineering, preserved in conditions that have arrested decay. Her wreck has become an artificial reef where deep-sea organisms have colonized the hull, creating a localized ecosystem in the otherwise barren abyssal plain. But the human dimension remains paramount. For descendants of the 89 men who never came home, the wreck provides tangible closure. It confirms their fathers and grandfathers died exactly as survivors described, fighting a battle they couldn't win, buying time measured in minutes that saved thousands of lives on the invasion beaches. The forensic evidence validates decisions some historians had questioned. The extreme rate of fire wasn't recklessness, it was calculated desperation. Roberts challenges our assumptions about courage and capability. She was never supposed to fight this battle, but when Commander Copeland received the order to attack, he simply turned toward the enemy and kept shooting until the sea took him. USS Samuel B. Roberts is protected under the Sunken Military Craft Act as a war grave. The Naval History and Heritage Command prohibits any salvage or disturbance. 22,000 feet beneath the Philippine Sea, her guns still point forward. 89 men still stand their watch in the darkness. The steel that holds them carries a lesson. Courage isn't determined by the size of your ship. It's determined by what you do when retreat isn't an option you'll consider. Fair winds and following seas to the crew.